So a very good afternoon and warm welcome to this innovation workshop, part of On Helix 2022. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I'm delighted to welcome you to this session and on the first day of the digital element of our On Helix conference. So the topic of this session is the Belgium vaccines powerhouse. And we're going to listen to an introduction on the Belgium life science ecosystem, and then 3 exciting presentations from companies that are in the vaccine research space. So before I hand over to the moderator for this session, just a few housekeeping points. So you will have heard that we are recording, and this will be made available as part of the on-demand content for the conference afterwards. So you can always catch up on the content then. If you do have any questions, we will be reserving time at the end of the session for Q&A. So you can use the chat box to drop questions and comments into that. We do really welcome your thoughts, and if we can keep it interactive, that's always very welcome. And then if you're not speaking, just kindly be mindful of remaining muted and cameras off. That would be much appreciated. So this session is going to be moderated by Marc Duchamp, who is in charge of the international representation for BioWin. So I'm going to disappear into the background, Marc, but I am going to be controlling the slides. So I'm now going to hand over to you to kick us off. Thank you.
Thank you, Alicia, and good afternoon, everybody. And I would like also to mention that this presentation was prepared by not only BioWin, the life science cluster of the south of Belgium, so the Walloon regions, but also by Flanders, Flanders.bio, and my colleague William Doak is also attending this session and available for you for any question at the end of this session. So next slide, please, Alicia. So Belgium has a very strong and long story in biotech excellence. That's a very strong ecosystem, as you will see. Just speaking about the vaccines, because it is the topic of the afternoon, you see on that slide that the first GSK vaccine was licensed already in 1969. It was a rubella vaccines. And why in Belgium? Because actually it was a Belgian company called RIT, GSK acquired, and now it is really the headquarters for not just R&D, but also manufacturing and everything actually in Belgium. And moving forward, you can see that UCB is also a Belgian company, registered the first blockbuster Zyrtec in 1980. PGS was established in 1982 for the agrobio. Janssen Pharmaceutical, G&G Pharma, if you prefer, created Tibotec and Virco in 1994. InnoGenetics was one of the first biotech companies listed on the European place in 1996. Ablynx was established in 2001. Argenix in 2008. Next slide, please. And moving forward, you see 2011 Master Cells, Itheos Therapeutics, which is one of the leading biotech now in Cambridge, US, was created in 2012. Universals, we have the pleasure to have with us today in 2013. Galapagos and Celiat were the companies listed on the Nasdaq already in 2015, and Mrna on Euronext. Sanofi acquired Ablynx for 4 billion euro in 2018. I mentioned Itheos, but Itheos announced the biggest pre-IPO capital round of 425 million in 2020 before going to Nasdaq and before signing a very big deal with GSK in oncology of about 2 billion. Catalent acquires Master Cells and Delphi Genetics to create Catalent Biologics. And in 2021, Argenix received FDA approval for myasthenia gravis treatment, Vyvgart, and started the commercialization. So some elements, some milestones, just to show you that we have a long history of excellence in biotech in Belgium. Next slide. This is a slide which has to be updated, but the message here, if you look to Germany, Denmark, and Belgium, we are always in the top 3 of aggregated market capitalization per European country. The latest figures are showing that Belgium, Denmark, and Germany are on exactly the same position. And this is really a good testimony also of the very big dynamism we have in the ecosystem in Belgium. Next slide. And it is also the case for the clinical trials. We are number 2 in Europe for new therapies. We have about 500 plus clinical trials up and running in Belgium on a yearly basis. 80% are sponsored by pharmaceutical industry. We are specialized in phase one clinical trials. We are by far above the European average. This is the same for the phase 3. This is the same for the commercial trials. And this is really the case for vaccines, but also more and more in other therapy areas like oncology, for instance. But if you look to the proportion of the Belgian population in Europe, which is 2.6%, the market share of Belgium for the clinical trials is 16%. And we can also here highlight the big support we have from the regulatory agency with regard to clinical trials in our country. Next slide. So Belgium definitely has an impact on the global public health. We are one of the top export countries for biopharmaceutical and vaccines, so 56 billion euro in 2020. So the medicines we developed and produced, including vaccines in Belgium, to help patients all over the world. So it means that in 2020, biopharmaceutical accounted for more than 15% of the total Belgian export. And specifically in the Walloon regions, it's almost 35%, just to give you an example. So if we look to the market share, if I could say that in Europe, so 14% of the EU biopharmaceutical export are shipped from Belgium, and the first customer is the US with 24%. But just to come back on vaccines, again, the topic of today, for the COVID-19 vaccines, if we look to 2021, Belgium shipped 1 billion dose COVID-19 vaccines all across Europe and the world during this unfortunately and unfortunate pandemic. So it means that Belgium was really able to react very quickly and to start to produce large scale for supporting the needs of the population all over the world. Next slide. And it means that we have quite a lot of ongoing investment. If you look to R&D, again, 2020, we had 13 million euro spending R&D on daily basis. So meaning almost 5 billion euros spent in R&D for the year 2020 in Belgium. And with a growth over the 5 years of 71%. The same for the patent. If you look to the patent application in biotechnology and pharmaceuticals, it is 1 per day, at least in 2020, with an increase of 34% over the last 5 years. So, which is really a very big number. And if you look into the density of the researchers in Europe, we have the highest in Belgium, and even 30% more than in the US. Next slide. And it has also an impact on the employment, and you see the growth of the employment. So in dark blue, you see the direct employment, light blue, it is the indirect employment, and in green, the induced employment. So Belgium is always in the top 3 of the important employers in Europe with regard to the biopharmaceutical industry. And again, with the growth, a growth of 20% over the last 5 years, and I can tell you that it is continuing and even faster now. So for more than 40,000 FTEs in direct job, 8.5% of the direct jobs in Belgium are in the biomanufacturing industry. And because I mentioned that it is growing, you can imagine that you need to have very strong policies and strong programs in order to support the development of the ecosystem. And that's what I'm going to show you on the next slide. So we have several programs and institutions really dealing with the development of the talent for this industry. The first one is Apta Skills. It is a competence center, actually training 4,500 people on a yearly basis with a job integration rate of 85%, still extending today, and able to make tailor-made programs for companies, including GMP production. But we have many new initiatives, like the one of VDAB and Vitalent in Flanders, training the job seekers for getting a job in pharma and biotech. So it is 5 days professional training. The first training happened in Antwerp this year, and this is really a very interesting partnership in the field of pharma and biotech. On the next slide, you will see that we have also other initiatives. So, for instance, at the Solvay Brussels Schools of Economic and Management, we have launched, I say we because I'm academic director there, an advanced master program in biotech and medtech ventures to generate the future talent for managing the biotech and the medtech companies. Next to that, VIB, which is also partner of the Solvay program, but VIB developed Biotope, which is an incubator program also to support a leadership team, more in the agri-food innovation, but help these people to transform innovation ideas into viable companies. Very recently, BioWin launched the Talent Now project, which is a unique initiative to tackle the recruitment shortage we have, very acute shortage, because again, as I mentioned to you, biomanufacturing, bioproduction is developing very fast. So we are constantly looking to recruit people. So we have 100 of positions open on yearly basis. This is here a public-private consortium with the big industry leaders like GSK, Universal, Takeda, UCB, Janssen Pharmaceutica, Thermo Fisher, and others. And it is supported by the Walloon government. And it is really creating the foundation for the European Biotech Campus, which will be fully operational in 2025. It will be a state-of-the-art campus, a biotech campus, one-stop shop with an active watch to really evaluate the needs and centralize actually the job training and offers, and focusing on innovative teaching methods like virtual reality, augmented reality, digital twins, so you don't have to block a GMP room, for instance, for training, so it will be delivered like that. And it is supported by the regional government, but the federal governments, and also the European Commission. Next slide. So we have success stories in Belgium, emerging technologies and established international players. So today we will have 3 presentations. The first one with the company Universal, I mentioned, the second one with Eurogentech, Canega, and the third one with Osivax, which is an R&D company developing new vaccines. Next slide. And just to give you some key takeaways with regard to the strengths of the ecosystem we have in Belgium. So we have actually several ingredients explaining why this ecosystem is so dynamic and so complete and so successful. We have world-renowned academia, like you have in Cambridge. You have local SMEs and startups in full development. We have large multinational companies, but with very strong local anchorage. I mentioned Janssen Pharmaceutica and J&J. I mentioned UCB. I mentioned GSK Vaccine, but we have also Takeda. We have also Pfizer. We have Sanofi. So we have very big presence of the pharma and the biopharma industry. But we have also innovative suppliers and service providers, and a lot of very strong and big CDMOs you will hear in a while. Access to talent, you understood that we are very active and dynamic in developing proactive programs and policies to support the development, and also the supportive government with an interesting combination of regulatory measures, tax measures, but also incentives for the biopharma R&D. It's time for me now to hand over to Mrs. Kane Antrobus, Chief Investment Officer of the company Universal, to have the possibility to present this company. So Kate, over to you.
Thanks so much, Mark. Thank you. And hi, everyone. I don't know how many people there are on the line, but I'll keep an eye on the chat. So if people have questions as I speak, please feel free to write them, and I can try and answer them in real time. So I'm here. Well, we're presenting Belgian Vaccines Powerhouse, but you can probably hear that I'm English and was lured over the channel precisely because Belgium is quite such an interesting place to be from a perspective of vaccines and biotech. Next slide. So I represent Universals. We are actually a group of life sciences companies. There's 6 companies now, but they're all kind of under the collective banner of Univercells. And it's a mission-oriented company. The idea is really to enable and expand the biotech industry to deliver biologics for all, which sounds very snazzy. What does it really mean? It means we create new manufacturing technologies for complex molecules, primarily biologics, viral vectors, for cell and gene therapy, for vaccines, also now increasingly in RNA, monoclonal antibodies. And we have this vision of not only using those technologies to produce vaccine products, but exporting those manufacturing technologies with a low cost, low footprint facility around it to give access to the means of production. And you saw the figures from Mark about how Belgium shipped so many vaccine doses. I think, I could be wrong, someone will correct me if I am, I'm sure, but I think Belgium has the largest vaccine production per capita. For a small country, we punch way above our weight in terms of vaccine manufacturing capacity, and as a result, did export a large number of vaccines during the pandemic and the rest of the time. But I think Univercells is really trying to think about the model beyond that, which goes around exporting ecosystems and helping geographies that have not historically, either geographies or partners that have not historically produced themselves, to access biomanufacturing capacity. We do take impact and mission very seriously, so the SDGs and various others are quite an important part of how we think about to design our business. We are for-profit, we're not a not-for-profit, and so for us, sustainability is also means being financially sustainable in the long run and having our business model be financially sustainable, but we do take impact and mission very seriously, and that runs through everything that we do. Slide. So how do we achieve this rather grandiose vision? It's quite cool to see Univercells. We consider ourselves quite small and disruptive and startup. It's pretty cool to see us in a bubble with Takeda and Thermo Fisher in the emergent technologies. We'd be pretty happy to be in that class of competitors or comparable companies. So yeah, the way that we've tried to think about this is to address the challenge of biomanufacturing from an engineering perspective. Univercells is made up of mostly originally engineers, not so much molecular biologists, not so much cell scientists. And so we really think about trying to take lessons from engineering and from industrial manufacturing from other industries and apply them to biomanufacturing. This means that we are looking at automated production, we're looking at intensified production, making everything much smaller. So those kind of giant ballrooms with 2,000-liter bioreactors hopefully will at some point become a thing of the past, making everything modular and making everything very, very scalable. We also think a lot about not just historic vaccines, but how new. I think one thing we can rely on or bet on is that there is this extraordinary relentless march towards innovation from scientists, maybe some of them are on the line, in new products, new therapeutic modalities, which is a fancy way of saying new stuff to treat as yet unmet global health needs. And our kind of bet is that if we can think about, some very smart people will make the products, if we can think about the ways to manufacture and produce the products so that that also supports access. And so for us, there's a really complementary role between the kind of science, discovery, clinical pathway, the development of new drugs and vaccines, but also making sure that as those new drugs and vaccines are developed, they are made in a way that supports scale and access. And we try and design all of our manufacturing platforms so that they go straight from the lab all the way to large scale, and there isn't this classical step change where you have to invest new money, new and lose time at every kind of different scale. And finally, I think the last piece that we really try and think about is that historically a lot of the access gains, particularly in vaccine manufacturing, have come from relying either on massive scale or on labor cost differentials. When you make vaccines, which is a high skill process in India, in China, as some of the key geographies, there's historically been an ability to arbitrage that difference in labor cost, but that isn't really the case anymore. And so we really try and think about instead of sort of labor cost differentials, technology-driven affordability, and the idea that you can produce, even while paying your people top salaries, you can produce at costs that support access and affordability, even at lower scale. So we really think about an in-country, for-country production model, in-country, for region, and hope that this will open up new markets. And that, I think, in the context of the pandemic, we've seen a drive towards demand for autonomy, a drive towards control of production, and that's been a big part of how we've thought about our business. Slide. So practically, as I mentioned, that we're a group of companies. You don't need to worry about all the names unless you're very interested, but it's really new technologies made available in 3 business models. One, the manufacturing technology, so the actual equipment. We have a portfolio in viral vector production for gene therapies and for vaccines. We have a portfolio in RNA, also for vaccines, but equally RNA therapeutics. And that's really just a sort of traditional equipment sales business model where we make those available to other CDMOs, to biotech, to biopharma, and to a certain extent earlier stage innovators, and also partner often with academia to have a sort of bench version in the lab, which can be used for the upstream side of things. CDMO, so we provide services on that equipment. We can optimize the process. There's a whole know-how that goes around how to use an equipment, always around access, around low cost and scalability. And it doesn't make sense for every single partner to invest in their own manufacturing capabilities. So for those that don't want or need to, we have a large GMP site available in Belgium, in RNA, in viral vectors, and are planning to build a couple of others in some other key geographies to make sure that there's, access to bioproduction capacity, even for those who don't want or need to build their own. And then the third business model, as I mentioned, is this idea of opening up new markets and acknowledging that there's a lot that goes around an equipment, a facility, that actually means it can produce a safe, efficacious, approved, high quality, complex molecule or biologic. And so there we have 2 businesses that are really focused on everything else. So everything that goes beyond the technology and the equipment around site design, regulatory, tech transfer, training, and that training goes all the way from a process-specific training in a particular tech transfer to basic things like how to do a supplier audit for GMP or something like that. So that's the kind of collected universals. Slide. And yeah, we've got a lot going on. There's things I didn't even mention, which include something we called ULabs, which is our in-house innovation team. We are, one of our founders, Jose Castillo, who usually does this session, is for someone like me, I'm a banker and an economist, he's impossible to work with because he never stops coming up with new ideas, but it's also incredible to be around. And we've been really trying to think about how to funnel those ideas around new technologies in new areas, new modalities into eventually new businesses and making those available in the market. But in the next year or so, we've got a lot of quite key value inflection points coming up. We'll be increasing our installed base of technologies to more than 200. We've been thinking about launching new products, that some of which revolve around upstream, others are downstream, and the cell-based technologies portfolio. At a group level, this is actually dated because it says in 2022 we're going to be 350 people, but we're actually 500. So that tells you how fast our growth has been, because I think these slides were probably made, well, they say they're in June. And on the RNA side, that's really proving and clinically validating our manufacturing platform. We're incredibly proud to have recently announced a collaboration with the World Health Organization's mRNA Tech Transfer and Training Hub that is around developing an end-to-end unencumbered manufacturing platform for DNA, RNA, and eventually LNPs that would allow us to develop a portfolio of RNA vaccines and tech transfer those all over the world. And that again really speaks to Belgium's role, not just in potentially exporting vaccines, but exporting know-how and exporting entire biotech ecosystems to enable partners to make their own vaccines. And Unizima, which is our really our mission and impact focused. We have a collaboration in Senegal We are looking to probably announce a couple more this year and beyond around building new vaccine manufacturing sites and helping partners establish vaccine manufacturing capabilities in low and middle income countries, primarily on the African continent, but there might be others in other continents as well. So that is us, and delighted to be here, answer any questions, and looking forward to seeing the other presentations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kate. I suggest to look to the question at the end of the session. We will see in the chat later on. So thank you for your presentation. It's my pleasure now to introduce Pascal Bollon, Biologics Commercial Director of the company Eurogentech. Pascal, over to you.
Thanks, Marc. Yeah, my name is Pascal Bollon. I'm responsible for the commercial activities of the GMP manufacturing services at Eurogentech. And next slide, please. Today, I'm going to introduce specifically the GMP services. We do make R&D grade materials. It's all custom and also diagnostic materials. But the focus today is to give you a taste of what's going on in Belgium in terms of vaccine manufacturing. Next slide, please. So Eurogentech was founded in 1985. I won't go through all of this, but the key points are that we've been a CMO since 1996. One of the very early CMOs, actually, not just in Belgium, but in general for biologics manufacturing. And we were very fortunate to be able to work with a big pharma not so far away from us on a number of vaccine projects. This really put us on the map in terms of vaccine manufacturing. We invested very early in microbial capabilities, where primarily E. coli manufacturing for proteins and plasmid. But early on, we also saw the interest of Pichia as an expression system for vaccines. And so in 2000, we were already producing one of the first Pichia recombinant vaccines. 2004, we invested early in plasmid DNA vaccines, which is a very interesting technology where patients or subjects are immunized with DNA, which is converted eventually to the antigen. Next slide, please. In 2010, we became part of we joined a large conglomerate called Kaneka Eurogentech. And for CDMOs, this is an important step because to be part of a large group, as it provides significant financial stability. We had our first pre-approval inspection in 2011. This gave us the gold standard of GMP. The US FDA came in and evaluated our facilities, our quality management system. And today we commercialize a recombinant protein in the facility. Not stopping on proteins and plasmids, we invested even prior to COVID in 2017 in the expansion of an oligo manufacturing facility, again, injectable grade GMP oligos, mRNA manufacturing facility, and a large scale microbial facility for commercial manufacturing. And so since 2021, we've added mRNA vaccine manufacturing experience to our portfolio. Next slide. Just one slide on Kaneka. Financial stability is important in the CDMO world. It allows customers to know that we'll be there for the long term. It also allows them to know that we have the capabilities to expand where should they need bigger capabilities. And so Kaneka allows us to do that. And we've been fortunate and in their support for funding a number of expansions already, 3 QC, mRNA, and large-scale plasmid. Kaneka is a 4.6 billion euro in sales company, employing about 10,000 people, and they do many, many things. And we're the sole biopharmaceutical GMP subsidiary in their holdings. Next slide, please. Kaneka is 430 people. We have 4 manufacturing sites. All the GMP is done in Belgium. We do have some R&D research grade material that's produced in the UK, and some medical device grade peptide synthesis done in the US. But all the vaccines are manufactured in Liège, about an hour east of Brussels, and yeah, on the high-speed train line. Next slide. So the goal of Eurogentech is really to provide a one-stop shop in terms of clinical to commercial manufacturing. Customers can come with their lead, and we will develop a scalable, GMP compatible process, which can follow, which our facility can follow throughout the clinical phases. So most projects start in tox phase 1 with us, and then with the expansion that we just completed, we can now do kilo scale manufacturing for a number of products which are difficult to manufacture. Specifically, plasmid DNA at kilo scale is a very rare service. And this opens up opportunities in the DNA vaccine world, but also in the viral vector world for plasmid starting material or mRNA vaccines, also for linearized plasmid starting material. Next slide, please. In addition to the plasmid plasmid DNA I mentioned, moving to the right is the mRNA services. We've as I said, it's a new service, but we've recently produced for a very large company in the US 25 grams of mRNA. This corresponds to hundreds of thousands of doses. The beginnings of Eurogentech were in recombinant protein. We are a microbial only facility, and focused on E. coli and Pichia for those types of vaccines. We can also make protein conjugates. I'm thinking of polysaccharide to carrier proteins, peptide antigens to carrier proteins, as well as pegylated or other types of proteins. And then there's the therapeutic oligonucleotide service, which we recently also added. Next slide, please. An important aspect in selecting a CDMO is experience. And being microbially focused, we have a lot of experience in recombinant proteins using E. coli and yeast. I'm a big proponent of yeast also as a manufacturing platform. It secretes complex folded antigens into the medium, and they're easy to isolate, and they have all the disulfide bonds in place. But we also have a long track record in E. coli, and plasmid DNA is really now one of our key services across all the different vaccines and starting material platforms. Next slide. Yeah, today we've done about 187 different injectable grade products. And what's in the facility today is roughly almost 80 projects. And they're split across these different clinical phases. Most of them come early, tox phase 1. But a good CMO will have late stage experience. And that late stage experience provides customers with experience in how to do complex things such as risk analyses, scale down, model validation, process characterization, all of these things that are really critical to the successful commercial preparation is something that it's experience that you need prior, that you should have when selecting a CDMO. And so today, Eurogentech has 6 projects in phase 3. Those will go commercial. We have 3 projects in commercial animal health. That got cut off, and 1 project in commercial human health. That human health product is marketed in the US, EU, and Japan. And then we have 26 projects as a critical starting material. Those are plasmid DNA. But across all of those clinical phases are plasmids, proteins, and the mRNA in blue there in tox phase 1. Half of these projects are with big pharma companies, and the other half are with innovative biotechs. Eurogentech tries to keep a balanced portfolio of customers. Big pharma are important because they have a lot of projects. which is good for running the business. And small biotechs are usually pushing the envelope in terms of technologies and manufacturing limits. And so we, as a goal of being on the top of our game, then we look forward to also working with some of these more challenging types of molecules. Next slide, please. Geographically, so I mentioned half for big pharma. Geographically, it's equally split between North America and Europe. So I don't know where the 45% for North America went, but and then a small presence in Asia. This is also important for in CMO selection. You may do your clinical trials in Belgium or elsewhere, but having a CDMO that understands the various QC requirements and regulatory requirements for different countries is also important. Next slide. And then maybe one of the most critical aspects in CMO selection is their audit history. And so these are color-coded by organization. The first one is that yellow gold color. This is the Belgian FDA, if you will, the AFMPS. They give GMP accreditations to CDMO. Ours was, the first one was in '94. In that light blue are all the big pharma companies that come and audit us. In the pink salmon color are the biotechs. And you can see that we're audited every 2 or 3 years by the Belgian Ministry of Health. When there's duplicate audits, those are expansions. In green is the US FDA, and in purple is the Japan MHLW that came in. So all of these eyeballs coming in to evaluate the quality management system makes sure that the level goes up. It's a benefit for customers to have such a strong audit history. Next slide, please. So in terms of facilities, we're a multi-product facility for fermentation. So for DNA vaccines and for proteins, we go from 80 liters up to 2,200 liters. That's all the same or scalable equipment. Those a process developed at 80 liters can move to 500 liters or 2,200 liters with directly. We also have individual purification areas, downstream zones, and a 0.2 micron filtration for the supply of a sterile product. Next slide, please. And then in terms of mRNA, so in vitro transcribed mRNA, so enzymatically made, we go up to 40 liters. Today, we've our biggest scale that we've done for a customer is 5 liters and producing 25 grams of mRNA, but we're capable of going much higher. We have an expansion ongoing today to put in place a second mRNA production zone for mRNA vaccines. Next slide, please. And so a global footprint, I mean, we have a global footprint, but this is the Liège campus. We're in the different buildings are in a science park, whereas there's the one on the top right-hand corner there in yellow is the original building where we make DNA and proteins at medium scale. We added building B for large scale, kilo scale manufacturing of proteins and plasmid. Building C is project management, quality. D are meeting rooms, 3 is marketing. And the building EGT2 is where we house the R&D, diagnostic and mRNA manufacturing. And we've just finished the acquisition of land in that 4 area where we're ready to build further capabilities in these areas of plasmid, protein, and mRNA. Next slide, please. And so just a couple of pretty pictures. This is the large scale facility on the bottom left. Next slide. With large scale fermenters. Final slide, I believe. Next slide. Yeah, the various purification zones. Gentek makes drug substance, so we stop at bulk API. And next slide. And with that, I thank you very much and be pleased to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Pascal, for this very interesting presentation. So it's now time to introduce the third and already the last speaker of this session. So Mr. Alexandre Levert, CEO of Osivax. Osivax is a biotech company doing research and development in the vaccines field. So Alexandre, over to you.
Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. I will not show you photographs of some amazing manufacturing facilities, but I will talk about a vaccine, actually, specifically about a biotech company that develops disruptive and innovative vaccines. And that happens to manufacture one of them in the facilities you've just seen, i.e. at Eurogentech. So I'm very happy to introduce you to Osivax today. So we are a biotech company that has the ambition to transform the technology landscape of vaccines to address constantly mutating viruses. The way we like to really introduce the company is by thinking and talking about the unmet medical need that you'll see on the next slide. And really, as much as we all appreciate that vaccines are really at the foundation of modern healthcare and that they have profoundly improved the life expectancy in the past decade and the past century, actually, thanks to very efficacious vaccines such as polio, diphtheria, tetanus, where we see 90 to 95% efficacy. We really see today with some of the pathogens that are really mutating quite significantly and therefore evading vaccines. We see a profound unmet medical need with vaccines against diseases such as influenza or COVID-19 variants or even HIV, where there's really a very limited efficacy. And as a company, we have the ambition to really address this unmet medical needs of vaccines with low efficacy when the pathogens do mutate and do evade. And the way we want to address this is by really leveraging on our technology platform, which you can see on the following slide, and which really makes this company very special. We really base all our developments in this truly Europeanly developed self-assembling nanoparticle, which, I mean, I won't go into the details today, but I think to synthesize, it is a technology, a vaccine technology that is both able to let's say, trigger strong and potent B-cell responses. So these are antibody responses, which have been used in all the major vaccines, commercialized today, to which we have a differentiated and differentially superior T-cell vaccine, which really allows us to tackle this medical need of constantly mutating viruses. And the way we've been able to develop this technology is, in a nutshell, it's really by thinking differently about the structure of the virus-like particles and moving from spherical virus-like particle, which you have on the left part of this slide, to basically discoidal virus-like particle on the right, which really allows us to differentially add some capacities into these structures. So we've developed this technology, and I think it's interesting to discuss with partners from the UK, because we've developed this originally with some British partners not far away from Cambridge, but in Oxford University, and are still working significantly with partners in the greater Cambridge region. We are really developing this platform with the support from renowned experts, and I think which you'll see on the following slide. But to say that this is cutting edge science. Please, yeah, next slide. This is cutting edge science that's being supported by real experts in the field of vaccinology in the UK, obviously, but also in Belgium, in France, in the US, and elsewhere. And based on this technology, we are developing a pipeline. You'll see it on the next slide, which basically starts with our lead program in influenza, currently in phase 2A. And we were referring to Eurogentech, but this product is being produced in the Liège Eurogentech facility. Currently in phase 2, I'll get into a little bit more details around this program. And we are also diversifying or expanding our pipeline based on the same technology platform in other viruses which are either constantly mutating or which require T-cell immunity, i.e. COVID-19 or HPV therapeutic. The last point I wanted to say on the introduction about the company before I get into our lead program is regarding the fundraise. So we were created in 2017. Can you go to the next slide? We were created in 2017 in both France and Belgium, actually. And since then have been able to secure around 50 million euros of funding. Most part of that is to non-dilutive funding, but also through dilutive funding. With these proceeds, we've invested around almost 80% in influenza and around 20% in COVID-19. So I would just like to spend a few minutes on the influenza program that will show you how disruptive and how innovative this company can be. On the next slide, you'll see the specific unmet need in influenza. So influenza vaccine is a pretty peculiar market because despite having some vaccines, which do represent a significant market of around $6 billion, these vaccines are not properly effective. We're talking about 20 to 60% efficacy in adults and roughly 10 to 50% in elderly. And this is due to the constantly mutating nature of the virus, which makes it evade from the vaccines before they even actually commercialized. In this context, the international community, and I mean NIAID, so the NIH in the US, the WHO, the Gates Foundation, they've defined an ambitious target product profile where the target should be 70% across all strains of influenza and across all age groups. So this really is our target. And we believe we are basically working hard to get to this target. In order to do so, we are targeting the internal parts of the viruses, which you'll see on the next slide, and really addressing targeting the virus in a very disruptive and different way than the current and conventional influenza vaccines would be doing. So if you think about the conventional approach, which you see on the top part of this slide, the current seasonal flu vaccine are targeting the outer membrane of the virus through antibody or B-cell responses. That makes them, somehow effective when the virus, the strain of the virus is similar to the strain that's in the vaccine, but that makes them, suboptimal, I would say, when there is what we call a virus drift. So unlike this approach, what we are doing at Osivax is we decided to use our technology platform to target the internal part of the virus, which mutates much less, and which, for which a T-cell response would be effective. So it's very difficult to trigger such a T-cell response, and we've worked for around now 8 years on a program that is currently in clinical trial. Can you go to the next slide? With around 800 subjects being tested in 4 clinical trials. So we're now starting to have a bit of an understanding about the level of efficacy, well, the mechanism of action, the safety, and the level of efficacy of the product. If I'd like to just summarize the results of these 4 clinical trials in one slide, it would be on the next one, where we've been able to show, maybe can you go to the next one? I think there's an animation. Yes, thank you very much. Where we've been able to objectivize a 70 to 80% efficacy into independent trial in the ability of the vaccine used at the proper dose to prevent the emergence of symptomatic influenza. So we're doing this with exactly the same vaccine on those two consecutive or separate influenza season, where the influenza strain was different. In addition to that, and So with this, with these results, which would be well above the current efficacy of conventional influenza vaccines, we want to explore two indications for the product. That's on the following slide, and then again the following slide. We intend to position this product in combination with the current influenza vaccine for the elderly population to actually be able to prevent influenza disease irrespective of strains. And we also want to continue to explore the possibility of this product to be used as a standalone in healthy adults and really reproduce the level of efficacy we've seen, therefore to be able to prevent influenza disease irrespective of strains. When we think about these two indications and looking at the clinical data we have, we believe that this product would be a best-in-class, that's synthesized in the next slide, would be a best-in-class product in the prevention of influenza in terms of the efficacy to safety ratio, and clearly being as safe as other vaccines that are either currently commercialized or in development, and most likely being more effective and more efficacious in preventing the influenza, the emergence of symptomatic influenza. We need, of course, to continue working on this program with phase 2b clinical trials with 7,000 subjects, but we clearly see this program as being a game changer in the next few years in the influenza environment. Beyond that, we believe that this program has really demonstrated the potency of the platform to trigger effective and protective T-cell response, and we are expanding, that's on slide 51, we are expanding, as I was saying at the beginning, our platform in other T-cell based vaccines using the same approach and same mechanism of action in COVID-19, and other targets, other mechanisms of action, but using the same platform for HPV therapeutic. We're talking about viral-induced cancers, but also thinking about ways to incorporate this VLP platform into mRNA for cancer immunotherapies. I would like to close this presentation with the next slide, talking about what are our next steps. Our next steps are to raise some funds in order to be able to continue the development of our influenza program with one or maybe even two phase 2b clinical trials, which would clearly demonstrate and quantify the efficacy of the product so that we could then license it to Big Pharma. And then as a second objective with a Series B fundraising, we'll also be diversifying the portfolio in order to really maximize the medical value and clinical value of this platform and develop novel, disruptive T-cell based vaccines. So I'd like to thank you for your attention. Maybe go to the next slide and take any question you may have.
Thank you very much, Alexandre, for this very insightful presentation. So we still have, I would say, 3 minutes for the question. So Alicia, I don't know whether you have questions in the chat or someone has, or otherwise you can take a microphone and ask directly to the speaker.
Mark, if you would have any questions you'd like to kick off with, then I'll just remind the audience that they can use this opportunity to either put a question into the chat box, or if it's easier to raise your hand using the Zoom function, then I can keep an eye out for that on the participant list, whichever works for you.
It is working. So Alexandre, definitely with the LZVax technology, you are targeting the vaccines where you have a lot of valence, I would say, or a lot of variation of the virus. You mentioned already HPV, you mentioned COVID, you mentioned flu. Do you have other ideas with regard to
we have plenty of ideas. We think that this technology has demonstrated its potency in terms of its capacity to trigger protective T-cell responses with a very good safety profile and in a manufacturable way. And I think we've been constantly showing this with Eurogentech. So we have plenty of ideas. That being said, we don't communicate on it. I think we really think about mostly in infectious diseases with intracellular pathogens, mostly viruses where you need T-cell responses to be protective. But we also are willing to explore how this technology might synergize or be combined to mRNA technologies when it comes to personalized cancer vaccines and immuno-oncology, where you need as potent as you can T-cell responses. And we know mRNA are excellent, but we think that this technology could be synergistic. So that's why we think about it really infectious diseases using our know-how and potentially other exploration in immuno-oncology.
Thank you, Alexandre. I think we still have 1 minute for you, Pascal. You mentioned actually also your capacity in mRNA production. Definitely, we saw that the needs are very huge for the moment, and not just in Europe, but I had the chance also to be the moderator of the recent webinar between European Union and African Union. Are you looking also like Universal Unisuma to expand activities in Africa as well?
We're trying to keep up with all the requests already in Europe and the US. So today that's our primary focus.
Primary focus, and to expand the capacity to address all the needs.
Yeah.
And specifically, Kate, it was nice to see what you are developing, not just actually for Europe, but for the emerging countries and Africa in particular. Could you elaborate a little bit on that? So what do you do exactly today? I saw something in South Africa recently.
Yeah, of course, delighted to. So there's a few different answers to that question. We have the WHO's mRNA Tech Transfer and Training Hub is a South African entity called Afrigen, which is also a South African private biotech. So we have a technology collaboration with them, which is around the development of an end-to-end unencumbered RNA vaccine platform, but including we're responsible for the manufacturing piece, they're responsible for the candidate side of things, but that would be the first African-owned RNA vaccine, at least that we're aware of. So that's in South Africa, and the idea is then to transfer that manufacturing platform and candidate to BioVac, who are also in South Africa, and then there's a list of 20 spokes across LMICs that could, some combination of those could receive a sort of candidate and manufacturing platform transfer. Probably not all COVID, because it doesn't make sense to build 20 new COVID facilities. In Senegal, we have a collaboration with Institut Pasteur de Dakar, which is the only WHO pre-qualified vaccine manufacturer in Africa. They have a yellow fever vaccine, but we are working with them on something called Project Madiba, which is to build a large viral vector CDMO effectively that would focus on pandemic and epidemic vaccine process development, manufacturing, stockpiling, etc. IPD is also one of the spokes, and they are, then we have a series of other collaborations that really revolve around building the enabling ecosystem, so training programs, helping with the human infrastructure as much as the physical infrastructure, regulatory maturity and harmonization programs. So we find it really helps that we have a GMP approved large-scale facility in Belgium, so that when we're looking at maybe a novel design in a country where the regulatory authority is not as mature as we see in Europe or the US, to be able to say the same design, the same footprint, the same processes have been endorsed and approved by the EMA, and to really work directly with the in-country regulatory authorities to kind of get to the ML3 maturity level 3 or 4 that they have. We've got a couple of programs there in Rwanda and in Ghana, and then there's a few others. So it's quite broad, and that's because Universals has these multiple different entities.
Thank you very much, Kate. I think it's time for me to close the session because I don't see a specific question arriving in the chat. So I would like first to thank the presenters, so Kate, Pascal, and Alexandre, for the brilliant presentation we saw today. Definitely, you understood that Belgium is the vaccine powerhouse we mentioned at the beginning of this session. And I would like also to thank One Nucleus, actually you, Alicia, but Tony Jones also, for having given this opportunity for Belgium to be in the program of on Helix today. So don't hesitate to contact the speakers after this presentation, or when you will see this recorded webinar, and they will be happy to answer any of your questions. So I wish you a very good afternoon. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much to Mark and the presenters. We will resume innovation workshops tomorrow at 10 a.m. with an innovation showcase. And in the meantime, please continue using the app for your partnering needs. Yes, thank you everyone, and have a wonderful afternoon. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks
Thank you.
all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.